So, as many of you know with me, I'm not a big fan of polls because a poll is not a predictive tool. It just tells us about a snapshot in time. And a lot of the polls out there are really dubious. What I basically like to do is look at the polls, see how the crosstabs are absolutely wrong, and then discredit the poll based on the BS crosstabs. Now, if some are in line with what seems to be normal, then I can say, okay, that's all right. But when one poll says that 46% of African American voters in the state of Pennsylvania are going to vote for Donald Trump, I'm going to call BS out on that poll. And this is why I don't like polls. And on top of not liking polls, I don't like the polling aggregate system either, or the websites that promote them. 538, Nate Silver's website, Real Clear Politics. I hate these. But unfortunately, a lot of people in the comments and other things always quote these 538 numbers. Oh, well, this poll was the best of this, or rate this, or this is what the aggregate says. I personally don't care. And I'm going to get into today's video why I don't care about what 538 says. You know, a website that you only need to have a sample size of 100 people to be included in their aggregate, which is pretty sad. So let's go ahead and delve into 538 and why I'm not a big fan of theirs at all. And then let's talk about Nate Silver later on and talk about why he is in the perfect position to make a lot of this. So let's go ahead and talk about our first poll. So the first poll I want to talk about, and I say poll really with quotes, is Patriot Polling. So this was a group of two high school students, not even a legitimate firm, that started doing polling and then went to 538 apparently and went ahead and got accepted to 538, which really shows due diligence on 538's part, that they're letting two high schoolers all of a sudden put their poll up with legitimate polling firms who have been doing this for decades, right? So this in and of itself just shows the quality of 538 and how they're not really caring about that much quality. Now, when it comes to these other polls that we're going to be talking about regarding 538, I reached out to 538 to see if they would like to respond to any of the claims that I'm going to be making in this video. Here's the email I sent to them. I never did hear back from them, so I just want to let you know. But if I do hear back from them in the future, I'll let you know what they say because I'm kind of interested in their answer as to why they're allowing some of these polls to be still part of their site. Now, one of the first polls that have popped up has been this SoCal polling. Now, this is, again, a polling firm that has come out of the middle of nowhere, seems to be funded by Republicans, and only has two things connected to it: a Twitter account and a Substack, which they just run the polls on the Substack. Now, on their Substack, they don't have anything about who's involved or whatever. It's just this phantom type of polling firm. Now, I did reach out to SoCal Polling or SoCal Strategies or whatever they're called right now to ask who they were. Now, they did respond back to me talking about how my video that I did about them, my live stream, was a quote-unquote bullshit video, though they couldn't refute anything that I said in the video. But anyways, with that, they did email me back and possibly showed me some information that they have been with a polling firm in the past. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and divulge any more of the information regarding that, but suffice to say, they were with a polling firm. I don't know if they were there in the capacity of an intern, of an employee, or whatever. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. And when I do, I'll make sure that I report that to you. But still, this is a quote-unquote polling firm that has no track record, no history, nothing whatsoever, has just been created, doesn't have a website, doesn't have a list of clients. We don't even know who does the poll, but yet 538 sits there and says, that's good. That works for us. Now, another poll that came in around the exact same time was Quantum Insights or Quantum Polling. They keep on changing their name. Now, they do have a website, but interestingly enough, that website has just been created in the last month. So it's essentially a brand new website. And the number that they have listed on there is a number for a gym in Lufkin, Texas that no longer exists. All right, so Future Dave here. Since I saw that phone number on the site last time, Quantus Insights has now taken the phone number off of their website, so now there's no way to contact them even by phone, but I'll still keep the phone number here so you can see what they had original. Maybe they got a new phone number from something. I contacted Quantus as far as asking why they think they're included in the poll and to release some information about who runs their organization, and they didn't give me any information as well. But suffice to say, what I think is really interesting when we look at the SoCal polling and the Qantas polling is that SoCal polling only has a few subscribers on their Substack. One of those just happens to be this newly formed Qantas poll, and they seem to release polls around the same time. So it is kind of funny and yet dubious that you have these two phantom polling firms, and I use that with quotes, going out there making polls, not seeming to have any other clients except right-wing YouTube channels that actually just spew right-wing ideas such as, Donald Trump's going to win New Jersey. So there's no transparency in who this company is, no transparency in any of the stuff they do. We don't even know if the data that they provide is actually correct. Anybody can fake any of this data. They can go ahead and say, yeah, we sampled this many people. Here's a nice spreadsheet to show that's the case. Or maybe change, fudge the numbers or whatever and say, yep, this is it. There's no proof whatsoever that they actually do this. Sometimes they do show some sort of proof, but again, we don't know if the numbers that they put in something is actual proof, because they'll show proof of we contacted this many people, but they don't show any proof that those contacts themselves are necessarily the responses within their poll, which also makes it really dubious because of the fact that we don't even know who they are. We just know that they work with ultra right-wing organizations and Twitter accounts out of all things, and they themselves engage in the same activity. Okay, and before we continue, I know a lot of people come here who are not subscribed to the channel, so please go ahead and subscribe. It'd be great to have you on board. If you want to be a member of the community, please, you can help the channel financially. You can also go to my Substack at votingtrend.substack.com and be a member there, where I got my Florida model in the paid subscribers section. All right, so when talking about right-wing polls and trying to skew the aggregates, we always have to talk about Rasmussen and Rasmussen reports. Now, 538 is happy that they went ahead and removed Rasmussen from their algorithm, but if you ever see something called Neapolitan polls and it done by RMG, that Neapolitan polls is actually something owned by Scott Rasmussen. So Rasmussen's polls are actually still in the 538 aggregate. It's just not the Rasmussen reports polls. So it is kind of funny that they are claiming that they've removed Scott Rasmussen essentially from the algorithm, but yet he's just in the algorithm in another way. Also with the RMG polls, you're going to see that they've done a few push polls in Iowa in regards to term limits, and you can look at the questionnaires that they have on there that really show they're trying to push the people in a certain way than necessarily having a legitimate poll. So that kind of in and of itself causes a problem. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about accuracy. And the first one I want to bring up is Atlas Intel. Now, I did a whole entire video about Atlas Intel before. You can go ahead and check that out. But suffice to say, they said that Pennsylvania was going to be won by Trump because Donald Trump was going to win 46% of the African-American vote in Pennsylvania, which we all know is absolutely horseshit, right? So why are they deemed to be accurate? Now, a lot of people don't talk about where they are in the overall rankings. I think they're in the 20s or the 30s. But why was this poll deemed accurate? Well, the problem with 538 and the accuracy in the way they look at stuff is that if you are a polling firm that does one poll and you only poll one group of voters, so for example, likely voters, adults, even if you're not looking at voters, registered voters, if you do one, it's essentially like taking one dart, blindfolding yourself and throwing one dart. Now that one dart for some people will hit the bullseye, and that's what happened with Atlas. But if you're a polling firm that actually does multiple polls, if you are a polling firm that does tracking polls, if you're a polling firm that actually segments the population into likely voters, registered voters, and adults, you're going to be penalized when it comes to 538. So if you notice in the 538 model, you'll notice that a lot of times they will have one polling firm with like 3 polls. And those 3 polls will be adults, registered voters, likely voters. So in the algorithm, this will end up being 3 polls. They're going to have 3 different results. So therefore, their results are going to vary. They're not going to look as focused and targeted. They're going to vary. And if you're a tracking poll, you're actually going to, and I mean a true tracking poll, not like what Rasmussen does, because from what I see, they don't have a tracking poll. But if you're a tracking poll, you're going to be penalized more because you are producing more and more polls every day. So 538 pretty much punishes those who go out there and poll more and more and more often, because it might take some of their more skewed results from maybe one poll, such as just asking adults, but they go ahead and reward people who just do one poll, who happen to get it lucky on the first try. So this is a problem when it comes to the accuracy of 538 and their accuracy models when it comes to ranking the pollsters. So Republicans, when talking about that 2020 accuracy, they also bring up Trafalgar, the Trafalgar group. They talk about how Trafalgar in 2020 were number 3 on that list. Now, they totally ignore the fact that they're number 279 on the overall list of polls. But, this is a problem when we just want to go ahead and select what data we want to look at to argue our point. But let's go ahead and look at Trafalgar Group because they have something in their methodology which is really, really odd and just makes it that it shouldn't even be considered a polling firm whatsoever. So in their quote-unquote methodology, they have something called a social desirability bias. And what they say in their methodology is, we have also pioneered methods to accommodate the social desirability bias. This allows us to obtain a poll participant's true feelings in situations where we believe, and that's very important, some individuals are not likely to reveal their actual preferences. Once you start interjecting your we believe aspect of it, it no longer becomes a random sample, but you just go ahead and roll with it. Let's think of 2016 and 2020. We always talk about how people who don't say that they're going to vote are going to maybe vote for Trump. Now, that's not necessarily true, but that's one of them. They could just be saying, people who say they're undecided, but yet they follow all these other parameters of being a Republican voter. Therefore, we're just going to say they vote for Trump now. It's absolutely subjective, absolutely horseshit, and absolutely not a real poll because now you've taken the whole idea of survey research, which is randomization, which basically says, if you're doing a poll of likely voters in the United States, every single likely voter has the same opportunity of being sampled to be included in the sample. Once you take those, now that could be randomized, but once all of a sudden you're saying, here's the data of our random sample, now we're going to go ahead and change it to our social desirability index or whatever the hell it is, so it agrees with what we want, that's bullshit. And all of a sudden, you don't have a poll anymore. Now, when we do talk about overall poll ratings that we look at, and I mentioned that they were 279, the Trafalgar Group, these poll ratings also don't really mean anything. Let's look at the number 13 poll on there, and that is the University of North Florida. Now, many people in Florida politics, like myself, we kind of scratched our heads when we saw this because they are known for having one of the most inaccurate recent polls in history. So in the Florida Democratic primary for governor between Nikki Fried and Charlie Crist, they came out and said Nikki Fried was going to win 47-43 over Charlie Crist. And this was just a few weeks before the primary election. So it was in the time frame like you saw with the 2000 Atlas and Trafalgar numbers. Now, when the actual results came out, Charlie Crist won with 60% of the vote to 35% for Nikki Fried, being absolutely 100% extremely off when it came to their sample, which that right there should make them disqualified from any polling aggregates whatsoever. But to be number 13 on the list for 538, that's absolutely insane. And by the way, for those of you who helped us fund the 13th Congressional District poll in the state of Florida that we are going to have out in the field next week, and we'll have those results out soon, the polling firm that did it for us, St. Pete Polls, they actually were one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate poll when it came to that primary. They said that Charlie Crist was going to get 59%. He got like 59.6 or 7, so they were spot on. So just so you know, when you're looking at our polls, we're looking at people who are actually really good at Florida politics. And I looked at their data. He actually gives the data for the polls and looked at the geographical breakdown. It showed stuff that I wasn't expecting, but man, it was a really, really, really good poll. So you can go ahead and trust this poll when it comes out because they have a good track record. Now, one of the problems it seems with 538 and with Nate Silver is it just comes to the point where they're now picking and choosing which polls they want to include in their aggregates. Now, I don't know if this is an opt-in aggregate. It could be the case, but I go over to Real Clear Politics. Now, I'm not endorsing Real Clear Politics at all, but I go over to Real Clear Politics and I look at their site and I see that they have some good, legitimate polls, usually local polls, that you do not see when it comes to the polls on 538. But yet 538 will do local polls in congressional races that are done by Scott Rasmussen, that are all of a sudden kind of push-pulley when asking about term limits. So it's coming to the point now, and I don't believe I'm saying this, even with the Rasmussen and Trafalgar in Real Clear Politics, it's almost like sometimes they have more legitimate polls than 538. It's getting to the point of being ridiculous. So it does seem like 538, Nate Silver, and others kind of pick and choose what polls they want in there. I don't know if it's to support their own narrative or whatever it is, but they really don't seem to have any, they don't seem to be really reliable, or let's say consistency, when it comes to actually including these polls into their aggregates. Now, this goes to Nate Silver himself, who I've always had kind of an issue with, mainly because of these, and with each and every election, Nate Silver and 538 throw more and more and more and more variables on. And if you ever deal with methodology and political science, one of the things that you want to have is you want to have a model that has parsimony in it, which basically means you need as few variables as possible to determine what the likely outcome or what the forecast is going to be. The fact that they just keep on adding more and more and more and more variables make it that it becomes really hard to replicate their model, because they'll add this economic variable, and this economic variable will have like 10 different variables inside of it. It's getting really, really convoluted. Nate Silver does that. So does 538. And they have to do this to adjust their numbers to deal with the real situation. Again, if you're looking for a good model, you want it to be parsimonious, have as few variables in it, and Nate Silver and 538 are just adding more and more and more variables. So now the problem I have with Nate Silver is right now. So I guess he is a consultant with an organization, company, or whatever called Polymarket, which I didn't even know existed until just a few weeks ago. But I guess it's done by some guy like Peter Thiel, whatever. I don't go into these circles. I look at politics. I'm not a degenerate gambler, though I do like to bet on the ponies every now and then when I'm in Chicago, but I only put $2 on a race. But anyway, this website is just essentially a betting website, and now Nate Silver is an actual person consulting this. Now, one thing that might seem weird with Nate Silver over the last few weeks is you notice that his projections keep on going back and forth, right? Whereas other projections are kind of keeping it in one field, such as 538. They've pretty much said, when it comes to the popular vote and who's likely to win, Kamala Harris has been up, even though the margin is changing for a while. Nate Silver keeps on going back and forth. Trump's going to win, Harris is going to win. Trump's going to win, Harris is going to win. You might want to ask yourself, why is he constantly going back and forth? And the fact that he's with a betting site might have a reason to do for this. So let's think about a betting site in general, or let's think of a casino, or as I already said, I like to go to the horse track. Some of them enclose like Arlington Park in Arlington Heights, Illinois. That's sad. But let's go ahead and do that. What is the best way if you own a horse track? What is the best way for you to make the most money? If you have a race with 10 horses, the best way for you to make money is for money to be put on each horse equally, right? If you put all your money, or people put all their money on one horse, all of a sudden, if you have to pay out, you're going to lose. Now, of course, if they put it all on one that loses, you can end up winning, right? So there are balances, but the best way to make money is to kind of spread that money out amongst the horses and then try to get as much of that money as you can. This is essentially what Nate Silver's doing by saying that Trump's going to win, then Harris is going to win, then Trump's going to win, then Harris is going to win. All he's doing is he's making people who go to Polymarket distribute their money in a way so that the Polymarket at the end doesn't end up crashing and burning by having to pay out a lot of money, or, it's a good risk, but be able to make a lot of money as well. So what he seems to be doing is distributing the likelihood of who's going to win to balance the market out so that Polymarket can expand and profit the most out of people betting on the presidential elections. And if Nate Silver is in this capacity of consulting, he knows that if he's consulting and the House wins and the House makes a lot of money, he's probably going to get a little bit of a hefty bonus when it comes to that. So there is a financial reason as to why Nate Silver keeps on going back and forth. Okay, so when it comes to Polymarket and Nate Silver, he's kind of in this win-win situation. Okay, let's say at the end of the day, he says Trump's going to win. And it seems like a lot of times he's going more that direction than the other direction. Let's say he says Trump's going to win. If he says Trump's going to win and people put their money on Trump, but Kamala Harris wins, the House wins a lot of money. Nate Silver's probably going to get a good payout because of that, right? So he is becoming actually influential in the way people are betting, and he might know that Kamala Harris is actually winning. Now, let's say it is the opposite. Let's say that Harris actually loses the election and Trump wins. Now, Polymarket might actually make less money, but he's going to be able to say, as far as his reputation, saying, hey, listen, everybody else said that Kamala Harris was going to win, but I predicted Trump, so that shows that I'm right. Give me more money because I'm the one that got it accurate. This is the perfect win-win situation when it comes to Nate Silver. And also, again, one of the problems, because I don't think he's really doing it for the benefit of people who want to get more information. It's more for, being like a degenerate gambler or something like that. And this is the reason why I hate when people talk about gambling sites and all that. I hate that because there's a profit motive in it, which if somebody goes ahead and changes the line or whatever, there's a profit reason as to why they're doing it, because they're looking at numbers and saying, we can push somebody this way or this way and force them there. Because remember, at the end of the day, the house always wins. All right, so thank you all very much. I just want to make this short video about 538 and Nate Silver and others, about the polling firms that are in there, because again, looks really, really dubious. Don't look at the polls. Don't trust the aggregates. Don't look at the polls. Okay, look at the underlying data. And if it says 46% of African Americans are going to be voting for Donald Trump, and thus that's going to make him win Pennsylvania, you might want to question that. So look at the underlying data. Okay, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are. I'll talk to you in the next video. Maybe we'll have one with numbers. I didn't do a number one so far today because we had no real numbers. It was the weekend, but maybe later today we will. I'll talk to you all later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.